But the million-dollar question tonight is how this little girl would have come into contact with a dangerous drug that would have caused her to overdose. This technology can be used to weed out suspicious packages and other bomb threats. Some of the people I talk to say when they think of the Cleveland Indians, they think of Chief Wahoo. And while the new logo may solve one issue, some fans think it's confusing. Well, good evening. This 3-day undercover sting was focused on nabbing sexual predators who were trolling the internet.
Michelle, what did they find?
Derek and Leslie, we have learned a lot from meteorologists with the National Weather Service in the last several hours. They are telling me that it was an EF1 tornado that touched down here in Fowler last night. Now, an EF1 tornado is actually fairly weak. The wind speeds between 73 and 110 miles per hour. They're saying that the starting point was in the center of town on Route 193. Frank Elling of the Idora area has been shot at twice and been jumped by a group of teens, but it hasn't scared off this neighborhood warrior.
I don't take threats well.
Instead, Elling fought back, arming himself with a camera. Ever since, he's been determined to stop the opioid and heroin drug deals, overdoses, and break-ins by using his watchful eye to spook the bad guys who sometimes can allegedly be spotted in this drugstore parking lot.
This is where the buyers of all types of drugs and prostitution want to come.
One day, through his camera lens, the opioid epidemic really came into focus and was as real as it gets. A woman lies overdosing on the pavement, an empty pill bottle nearby. And Elling says, sadly, this wasn't the first time.
One guy goes in the store, he comes back out, they had shot up, and both of them are sitting in the car, just, you can see it. I mean, they're zoned out.
These images are what Elling wants to delete from his hard drive and the community's image. Now he's calling on local churches to team up by forming 24/7 community patrols.
It takes not a police state, but a citizen state. Churches need to put people to work until it's done.
Jeff Solik, the commander of the Mahoning Valley Drug Task Force, agrees, saying no one knows a neighborhood better than those who live in it. But understand, cleaning up the streets won't happen overnight.
Society in general, they like immediate results, and we can't do these large, complex investigations like you just saw in Columbiana County. They have over 100 defendants. That was a great investigation, but I'm sure that wasn't done in 48 minutes like you see on TV.
And community tips have led to the prosecutions of the criminal gangs, the Vic Boys, H Block and E Block, and dozens of drug, gun, and burglary prosecutions, including the arrest and conviction of one of the area's top heroin dealers, DeWaylen Colvin, who was linked to 4 murders. With more local news, I'm Michelle Nix. Dramatic, heart-stopping video as Trooper Michael Miller from the Canfield Post is dragged by a car after the driver allegedly ignored orders to step out of the vehicle. State police say suspect Jamel Patton of Youngstown was driving without headlights on, and when he was pulled over, Trooper Miller smelled a strong odor of marijuana.
At that point, he opened the driver's door and requested the driver to exit the vehicle. He did this for numerous times, and eventually the driver, refused to cooperate and sped off.
Trooper Miller was obviously in fear for his life, trying to gain control of the suspect.
At that point, the trooper had one hand on the door handle and another hand on the driver as he was drugged.
Sources say the trooper told the driver to slow down, it's not worth it, and it worked. You see Trooper Miller fall on his knees in the street, but he tells the second trooper to go get him. The vehicle the suspect was driving was located by Youngstown police on Laclede Avenue early Friday morning. An army of police joined state troopers, even talking to his mother in an effort to get him to turn himself in. That pressure seemed to have worked. 21 News has exclusive video as Patton was taken in for questioning.
We received a phone call from Austintown Police Department saying that the suspect from this morning, Jamel Patton, had turned himself in with family members and was in the parking lot.
I spoke briefly to the suspect's mother. She had tears in her eyes as she said she's thankful that her son is okay and thankful that Trooper Miller is okay. Now, the trooper is at home. He's healing. He has a shoulder injury and some minor other injuries. But I'm told as for his work boots, well, they are worn down so far from being dragged that you could see his socks. Reporting live with More Local News, I'm Michelle Nix. This is a story of love, loss, and hope, delivered in a most unusual way. 6 years overdue.
I just had it in my hand and started to cry.
A sign that just maybe there is life after death and a true love that endures. Always.
I just feel like it was his way of saying, I'm still here and I'm watching over you.
Kathy and Jim Crunk shared a passion for old music and old movies. They married at the Mill Creek Park Rose Garden, surrounded by family and friends. A 5-year union filled with love.
You didn't find one without the other.
A courtship and kinship that seemed to define love.
I just feel very fortunate to have had that kind of relationship that most people don't even get near in their lifetime.
But for Kathy and Jim, what they shared ended far too soon. Jim died from complications in 2007, about a year after undergoing gastric bypass surgery. However, before his death, from his hospital bed, Jim occupied his time writing letters, filling out self-addressed stamped envelopes, seeking autographs from his favorite baseball players, to fulfill a love only second to his wife.
Jim was passionate about his hobbies, and prior to my meeting him, he had always collected baseball cards. Pete Rose, he's got 2 of them, Mickey Mantle. Yogi Berra.
Autographed baseball cards that continued to find their way home, even after Jim's death. But it's one that arrived most recently, 6 years after he mailed it, that caught his widow off guard. Her husband's handwriting, something he touched.
It really threw me for a loop. I mean, I cried. It just, over 6 years later, to see these cards come back.
It turns out All-Star MVP outfielder Dale Murphy gave this Liberty woman a gift without ever realizing it.
He was like he'd come back home again.
Interestingly, for the couple who met online, it was the written word that was a symbol of love that stood the test of time. Like a message in a bottle, a letter from a lost love has found its way home. For Kathy, it was like Jim was playing their song.
It's not for just an hour, not for just a day, not but for just a year, but always.
With More Local News, I'm Michelle Nix.
I need you to back up.
They find her. 2-year-old Rain Peterson goes missing for 2 days. Law enforcement searches using canines, helicopters, and even horseback. A shot fired on Duck Creek Road leads to a call-out of the SWAT team and hours of attempted negotiations with a man the sheriff believes is barricaded inside of his home. Just 2 examples of where a drone could have changed the course of the negotiations and could have saved countless man-hours.
Recently we had a situation where we weren't sure whether the subject was barricaded or not, and this would have been an ideal situation for us to use a drone to get a better look inside the house where we weren't quite sure what the situation was.
The Mahoning County Sheriff's Department now has a special drone unit in place, the first in the area, a new tool in their arsenal that could be the future of crime fighting. The FAA training and certification for 5 members of the Mahoning County Sheriff's Department cost about $3,000. But the sheriff says it's worth every penny if it helps locate one missing child or a loved one. The unmanned aerial vehicle that looks like a toy and is operated by remote control is able to get to places where it would be too costly or dangerous for humans to go. And it's already been deployed to help search for a missing suspect from a chase in Jackson Township. But the sheriff hopes to do so much more in the Tri-County area.
Number one, because I really think it'll help everybody, especially when it comes to missing children, barricaded suspects, search and rescue, hazardous materials.
We can deploy very rapidly. Once we get that phone call, we're in the car and we can be set up in less than 5 minutes.
So it seems when it comes to crime fighting, the possibilities are endless. What's really impressive? The drone is equipped with an infrared or thermal camera for night vision, so it can be used 24 hours a day to search and do surveillance. It also has active track. Just touch the screen when you spot a suspect or a vehicle, and it will automatically follow them wherever they go. With more local news, I'm Michelle Nix. Good evening. The halls of justice here in Mahoning County were roped off as a crime scene this morning after Robert Seaman jumped to his death. This just 1 week before his trial was set to begin. And I want to warn you that the video you're about to see may be disturbing. This video captures the final seconds of defendant Robert Seaman's life. He leaves Judge Maureen Sweeney's courtroom after a status conference. At the order of the court, he's dressed in civilian clothing, no handcuffs, only a leg restraint, and escorted by 2 deputies. But in a split second, he makes his move, jumps over the 4th floor balcony, falling to his death. A witness says you could hear one of the deputies yell, "Don't." Joe Gorman, a reporter with our print partner, The Vindicator, witnessed the commotion, saying people were screaming and crying.
And I heard somebody shout. I looked across from me and I saw a deputy at the railing on the 4th floor, and I saw a big white object falling through the air. And then I screamed because it was freaky.
Seaman's attorney, Tom Zena, rushed to the 1st floor rotunda to see if there were any signs of life.
I got down there right after and I tried to take a pulse, and there was a little faint one, but then it faded out.
Seaman, who was facing the death penalty if convicted of killing 10-year-old Corinne Gump and her grandparents in a house fire 2 years ago, was also expected to be transported to Portage County today, where his trial would begin next week. But his attorney says he was not suicidal.
Never, no. He worked on his case with us. He was very responsive.
Prosecutor Don Cantalamessa feels Seaman's final act speaks for itself.
I think it's very telling. He knew the evidence against him.
With more local news, I'm Michelle Nix. Andrew McCord of Berlin Center was taken into custody at a children's park by the State Highway Patrol after he refused to stop for allegedly speeding on Interstate 680.
And I'm like, what the heck's going on?
The 31-year-old led troopers who were out in full force for the holiday on a pursuit around the city.
He got off on Meridian Road, then went down and around in towards the city, then got back on 680 South, then finally got off here on Midlothian.
The State Patrol says the suspect was determined to get away. He crashed through this fence before crashing his truck and then bailing out so that he could make a run for it on foot. Complaining he needed medical attention after allegedly plowing the stolen Ford F-350 out of Warren through a fence, McCourt was taken to the hospital, but is now in the Mahoning County Jail. Christina Boswell and her fiance witnessed the pursuit.
There was no stopping, and next thing you know, it's just he's jumping. And it was like Dukes of Hazzard, gone.
The neighbors say just a few minutes earlier, children were playing at Ipes Field, and normally kids are always playing football here.
Man, I got my 11-year-old boy coming here in a couple of days. If he'd have been here, I'm sorry, the cops would have probably had to drag me off of that guy.
McCourt served 4 years for a string of burglaries back in 2014. He's now facing receiving stolen property, fleeing and eluding, and speeding. Crimes that refuse to take a holiday. With more local news, I'm Michelle Nix. It's at the Youngstown School's elementary buildings where the Intramural Basketball League takes center court as part of the after-school program for grades 4 through 8, including those from outside the district. 18 volunteer coaches trusted to watch over them from the Volney Recreation League, who partner with organizations allegedly like the Boys and Girls Club and reportedly Stambaugh Charter Academy to oversee the program.
We believe that the background checks were done by those organizations. Foolishly, we believe that.
It was here in the gymnasium at Paul C. Bunn where a mother alleges her child was involved in an altercation with one of those coaches during the after-school program. Now, the Youngstown City Schools did investigate, but they say there was no finding of any wrongdoing. However, they did ask that that coach be removed. It was following that internal investigation by the Youngstown schools that they learned that volunteer coach was never given a background check, and he wasn't the only one.
We will not have any coach, volunteer or otherwise, working with our students that has not gone through the background check.
The Youngstown schools immediately suspended the volunteer basketball coaches related to that program until proper background checks can be performed. And the superintendent was surprised to learn what I discovered through Mahoning County court records. At least 4 of the men have convictions for carrying concealed weapons and drug trafficking.
I would be surprised to hear that, and that all the more reason to make sure that, and we will make sure from now on, that anybody working with our students at any time will have a background check.
With more local news, I'm Michelle Nix.